This guy climbed down a ravine, carried this guy up on his back under fire, and the general wanted me to pin the silver star on him. I got up there and stand. This is God's truth. My word is a Biden. He stood at attention. I went to pin him. I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing.
Well, the Biden campaign is trying to explain what may be another mishap by the former vice president as the Democratic frontrunner dismisses reports that the emotional war story you heard there was filled with incorrect details. Joining us now is Mark Paustenbach, former national press secretary at the DNC. Mark, I appreciate you coming on with us this morning. The Washington Post clearly lays out in their piece for Biden a moving but inaccurate war story what he got wrong. This happened in 2008 when he was a U.S. senator, not as vice president, as he said. The service member who performed the heroic action was a 20-year-old Army specialist, not an older Navy captain, as he also said. So they make the case that over the span of 3 minutes, Biden got the time period, the location, the heroic act, the type of medal, and the military branch, and the rank of the recipient wrong.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. I think what's really important here is that obviously Vice President Biden was trying to demonstrate the selflessness and the heroics that our servicemen and women take every day, the acts that they do on our behalf. And I think, that's very clear. And I think that he was also showing a lot of empathy, which he's able to do, which is an increasingly thing that's in short supply in our given divisive political environment.
And the Washington Post doesn't deny that. They say he basically took 3 different events, tied them all together to tell this one heroic story. They said one element of the story is rooted in the actual event. In 2011, the vice president did pin a medal on a heartbroken soldier who didn't believe he deserved the award. But here is the former VP and presidential candidate defending that story. He said this.
I was making the point how courageous these people are, how incredible they are. This generation of warriors, these fallen angels we've lost. And so that, I don't know what the problem is. I mean, what is it that I said wrong?
It's one thing to say he was meaning to tell a story of heroism, but to not acknowledge then that he got most of the details of that story wrong. Is this a problem for the vice president? You tie this together with, this instance and previous gaffes. Is this creating a problem for your party's current frontrunner?
No, I think it really isn't. I mean, when families are going to be traveling or, being with their kids this weekend over Memorial Day, what they're going to be talking about are going to be kitchen table issues, right? The economy and health care. What they're not necessarily going to be talking about is Vice President Biden and what he may have said a week ago. Every time something comes up, whether that's with respect to a debate or whatnot, or just movement, because this race is relatively fluid, even though the vice president is clearly in the lead. Every time someone counts him out, the voters say, look, we like Joe Biden. We want him to be in the White House. This last week, you've seen 3 different national polls where he's been up by 13 points. So I really don't think it's going to matter to Democratic primary voters.
Mark Thiessen writes a piece published in the Washington Post this morning that basically Joe Biden and Donald Trump are running on the same message. Trump and Biden say, give me your vote, even if you don't like me. He writes in that piece, Trump and Biden are both running on the same message, but with one crucial difference. Trump is directing his at independent swing voters. Biden is directing that message at his base. Your response to that, Mark?
I think right now every candidate in every primary, obviously, President Trump is not going to have a really hard challenge in his Republican primary, right? But I think that Vice President Biden is doing a really good job of laying out who he is, what he stands for. And the American people, especially Democratic primary voters, know him. They know him as vice president. They know him as senator. And I think if you look at the key issues that are popping up in polls, Democratic primary voters over and over again care about the economy. They care about health care. And if you compare Donald Trump's positions on both of those, Vice President Biden really comes out, I think, on top at every point. I mean, you have Donald Trump, the president, tweeting things, causing the stock market to go up and down. He's not putting forth a plan to really bring health care to Americans. Instead, he wants to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. So I think the distinctions are pretty clear and important.
Well, for one thing, he is putting out a very strong case on the economy when he he continues to point to a lot of those growth indicators and factors that are out there. So that is going to be a point of contention as we see those candidates battle things out. Finally, I want to ask you about your party's embrace of the non-religious voters, and meanwhile criticizing religious liberties in this country. This is this new resolution Saturday praising values of religious unaffiliated Americans as, quote, the largest religious group within the Democratic Party. But to go as far as to criticize religious liberties in that, is this a good strategy for the Democratic Party? Mark.
Well, I can't speak to, it's a good question. I can't speak to the intent of those who are putting forth this resolution. I think perhaps what they were trying to do is say that all
those
Americans,
putting forth
regardless,
the resolution is the Democratic Party.
Well, no,
the
I
DNC.
understand. Well, it's individual members, and then it's voted upon. So I think the real thing here is that whatever resolution there is, at the end of the day, in terms of how the party talks about these issues, I think it's important to reach out to all voters, of course, but also the message is going to be determined not necessarily by the party, but by the individual candidates. And that's especially true in a presidential year when the message is going to be from the nominee as well. But I do agree that we need to be reaching out to all voters. It's really important to reach them where they are, and I think if we don't do that, that's going to be a problem for us.
It was passed by the DNC, championed by the Secular Coalition of America, an organization that lobbies on behalf of atheists, agnostics, and humanists on public policy, and they celebrated this move by the DNC as the first time a major party embraced American non-believers. We will certainly keep watching all of that. Mark, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for coming on America's Newsroom.
Thanks for having me.